I'm on the phone with Jonathan Rende, VP Product App Accelerator, based in Redwood City, California. Jonathan, good afternoon, and thanks for agreeing to the call.
Well, thanks for having me, Bill.
You bet. You recently wrote a piece for the Accelerator Think Mobile blog, Native versus HTML5, where you state, looked at objectively, the debate is over. And I have a few questions for you.
Sure thing.
Clearly, the native versus HTML potentially could be a contentious issue here. But before we get into that, can you start with some basics? What exactly is a native app for the listeners and subscribers of this podcast?
Yeah, so I define a native app as any application that could be written in a native language in a toolkit by the device and OS manufacturer. So if you're a iOS fan, it's Objective-C, people writing applications in Objective-C for iPads and iPhones. If you're a Google fan, an Android fan, it's writing those applications in Java that run native on that device that take advantage of all the API calls directly from the operating system. And I think there's another category of native apps that can be created by using those same APIs from a number of cross-platform products that allow you to build for multiple native platforms from a single development environment. So either of those are native apps to me.
I appreciate that. How does Accelerator fit into the mix?
So we are one of those cross-platform products, but it's not just for native apps. It's also, we support hybrid as well as HTML5. So it's the entire spectrum of front-end mobile applications that we support at Accelerator. And our open source product, many people have heard of, it's called Titanium. So that's freely available, has a community of about 500,000 developers, and there are well over 60,000 apps built on that in both the iTunes, Apple Store, as well as the Google Play Store. So it's a widely used and widely recognized toolkit.
Native versus HTML5. You've been writing about this topic for some time. This particular article that I'm referring to appeared several months ago. So maybe you can give some background. You state that looked objectively, the debate is over between native and HTML5. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, what I try to do is take a step back, and we support both. And so I have an opinion, a personal opinion, but then since, on one level, I'm also a representative of Accelerator, and I wanted to be objective in my viewpoint as much as can be. And so I wanted to look at several different categories. And I put down a bunch of different, there's almost, between 5 and 10 different categories I tried to identify, from user experience, performance, the importance of monetization, cross-platform costs, which is a big plus for something like HTML5 versus a fully native approach, the availability of programming expertise, timelines and the innovations that are happening in mobile when they compare HTML versus the native world, how quickly they're rolling out innovations. So I tried to look at all of those categories objectively and then weight those different categories as to, is one particular approach winning versus the other?
What's the bottom line? Net it out for me.
So when I look at it and net it out at the end of the day, and I have, like I say here, about 8 different categories, there are some that native win and some that HTML clearly are doing well. And I'm looking at how things are today. A lot of the dialogue in a light way in the religious argument that I've gotten on my blog points to the fact of where HTML will be. And I'm not debating that. I'm really looking at where things are today, since that's what we can evaluate. And if I do net it out, Bill, what I see is when it comes to rich user experience, native wins. When it comes to performance, native wins. When it comes to App Store monetization, clearly native wins. If you look at something like cross-platform deployment costs, clearly HTML5 wins. If you look at fragmentation challenges, it's even kind of on both sides. People look at HTML5 as not having any fragmentation. There is a lot of fragmentation there when it comes to different browsers. We're not talking about just one Chrome browser and that's it. It's hundreds of flavors, to the point that Facebook and others have created tools for browser compatibility. If you look at availability of programming expertise, HTML5 wins. And then the last two categories, immediate updates and distribution, HTML wins, but on timely access to new OS innovations, native wins. So I total this whole thing up. I see 3 in favor of HTML, 1 a wash, and 4 in favor of native. So I have to take a look at this today, and you look at the monetization, and I look at the weighting of these. For me, native wins.
Appreciate your perspective on that. So if I can, we'll peel back the layer a little bit. As you know, I advise the Department of Ed, various National Science Foundation grants. It's really important for those that are establishing the educational standard for these topics to really understand what it is you just said. And your thoughts on the fact that, or at least what I think I heard, was it doesn't necessarily have to be an either-or situation, right?
That's correct.
Because
there'll always be a place, I think, for HTML5. So when I'm asked the question, netted out, who wins, and I give an answer that, in my opinion, native wins, I'm not saying there isn't a role for HTML5, but what I am saying is today, if you look at all the categories, the ways that you could slice and dice this, that to me, if I had to make a choice today, one or the other, I would choose native. I do think if you look at any of the major financial institutions, they actually employ both. And there will always be a place if I'm trying to reach a broad audience of people and the user experience is not the most important thing, and it's primarily read-only or it's a different type of transaction type, HTML5 may work great. But the minute you really want an immersive experience that somebody lives in, I really think and performance is important, et cetera, native wins.
So I appreciate thank you for the follow-up. So it seems to me that organizations looking for a more robust function, feature set, usability might want to consider a native environment, assuming that they have the budget for it, right?
That's right. And I do think it is more expensive, and that was one of the categories, the availability of resources to build native versus HTML5. Clearly, you're in a better position as an organization on the HTML5 side. And I think that there are also options if you do require a rich native high-performing experience and you don't have Objective-C or Java developers. There are platforms and products out there, such as the one that Appcelerator sells, which assumes web skill experience. So you don't have to be an Objective-C guru. You can be a JavaScript expert, and you can build amazing apps in a very short period of time that are native in nature. So we like to say you can build a cross-platform native application at the speed of web.
It's a great tagline. So what skills, you mentioned JavaScript and other web skills. Can we kind of define that a little bit better? So, for example, if I were going to teach these topics today, and I can assume that there's a certain amount of people out in the community that have web skills already, those would be considered fast-tracked mobile application development, right? Because they already have perhaps HTML, JavaScript, CSS skills, right?
That's right.
That's one community, right?
That's right.
Now, how would those individuals get into what in addition to those skills, what do they need to be a robust native or an HTML5 mobile app development professional?
If they want to approach building native applications just for iOS and Objective-C, I don't know how familiar your audience is with learning Objective-C, but it's not until Apple made the decision to go with this for their mobile devices. It was somewhat of a lesser used language, and it's a pretty high learning curve for it. You have to deal with all kinds of things, memory management. I mean, it's a more complex language, more along the lines of C and C++, etc. If you look at traditional web programming skills, it's a lesser type language, and you want to, as you said, be familiar with CSS. You want to be familiar with, basic JavaScript capabilities are very familiar to those with web developer experience. It's an interpreted language that at runtime obviously runs as a native app. So you get all the benefits of running as a native app. The device itself sees it as a native app. So again, if you want to build a native app, not to get too sidetracked here, if you want to build a native app, there are two paths you can go. One is a steeper learning curve by using the native languages for those specific devices, and there's going to be a higher cost to learn, and there's going to be a higher cost if you want to deploy on multiple types of OSs because you'll have to rebuild the application for each OS. If you choose a cross-platform approach, such as that Titanium or the Accelerator platform, you can take your existing JavaScript skills, your CSS skills, if you're familiar with MVC frameworks, that's a part of the platform, as are many cross-platform products, and just build with your web skills a native app.
Thanks, Jonathan, for that. So let's talk about the opportunities. Does the future look bright for mobile application development?
Oh, extremely bright. I mean, one of the beliefs that we hold pretty core is that at some point, and it may be a bit of a bold one where I'm sure I'll get pushed back, but most new development going forward in many ways will become mobile development. And what do I mean by that? And I don't just mean the front end of the application. If you think of what it takes to develop a mobile app, a complete mobile system and infrastructure, there's clearly the front end of the app, but then there's also the back end of the app when you want to access data if you're in an enterprise. And I think, what I've seen over the last 20 some odd years is the enterprise, the major Fortune 100, 500, 1,000 companies have spent billions of dollars exposing their data and their information for consumption, whether it's by developers in-house or it's by customers who want to leverage that. Organizations are becoming less of what I would say publishers and more of transaction agents, meaning exposing their information that can be used in any forum possible. So the back-end information that sits in legacy systems or the new systems out there like health, cloud services like Fitbit and social networks, all of that information can be accessed and used as a part of an application. And most new development is happening for mobile devices, tablets, smartphones. I don't know of any major projects where people are spending significant dollars to roll out a new desktop application for Windows, or it just isn't happening anymore. And so to answer your question after a long run on, the future for development of mobile systems, both the back end and the front end, is wide open. It's all of the new investment in projects that I see in all the Fortune 500, 1,000 organizations I'm talking to today.